Okay. So, let's get started. All right, so today, very quick, I don't think we're going to run full time. We have a few slides left to cover, right, which when looking over them, I think will be pretty quick. And then we can do whatever questions you have and all of that fun stuff. Okay, so doesn't overdose usually count as suicide? No, unless there's clear evidence that it was done on purpose, they are classed differently. Okay, you're rewatching the lecture videos right now and asking how many people showed up right before reading week. I'm going to pretend that I believe that you're rewatching them and not watching them for the first time. Okay, it's like, oh no, the exam is coming. Okay, so we ended off on this slide, right, with the very, very, very depressing conclusion from Fiona Shand, right, asking men who have tried to take their own lives, about themselves, and the words that they use most often were useless and worthless, right? Concluding here, and this is the point Reeves is making, that largely men's sense of self-worth is tied to a very, very limited set of roles that they have in society, and that when they don't fulfill those roles, they feel useless and worthless. Okay, so another finding that Reeves highlights is how tenuously attached men are to kind of key institutions. And again, if you remember sort of the point that I've been trying to drive home, at least since the religion unit, but probably before, is that attachment to kind of normal social bonds, especially institutional life, is really, really important for how well people are doing, right? Those who are more attached, especially young people, tend to be doing better. Those who are less attached tend to be doing worse. Okay, and he cites this study, conducted by Catherine Eden and her team, where they did in-depth interviews with men in 4 American cities over 13 years, and the conclusion was a paper called "The Tenuous Attachment of Working Class Men," right? And basically what the paper charts is the erosion of key social institutions. And what are those? We're going to take the highlighter out here. Work, right? Men are working less. Family, we kind of have talked about that already. Less men kind of starting families. It's a more difficult path. Less men who are resident in the household with their children, even if they have them, and religion, right? And the rise of the nuns, right? Those who identify as nothing in particular when it comes to religion is a reflection of this, right? They're less attached. Okay, now why does that matter? Well, basically, as she and her co-authors said, created these institutions when they were there, right? Created the attachments, investments, and involvement and beliefs that guided and gave meaning to human activity in specific social domains, and they organized social activity into common patterns of behavior and supplied norms, beliefs, and rituals that legitimated such patterns. Right now, if again you're kind of an attentive student of sociology, and even if you're not, right, what does the lack of this kind of sound like? Well, in functionalist terms, right, if we're taking it from our buddy Emil Durkheim, that sounds like anomie, right? A loss of social norms, a loss of kind of shared beliefs, patterns, rituals that kind of allow people to move through life and know, where they fit, right? So the description here basically suggests that working class men as a whole probably, kind of as a class, suffer from a sort of anomie in post-industrial society, right? And they are only tenuously attached to any of the institutions, right? Work, family, or religion, right? We've seen fewer, again, a larger percentage of them not working, right? Family life is rocky and they're less attached to religion as well. And what do they say? Well, this results in a haphazard self, right? You don't quite know how to shape yourself and what meaning you have in your life without those kinds of institutional forms. So, I mean, if we're going to take this right out to kind of a big level, and what it means to be human, right? What is a person, what it means to be human, is largely, it's really difficult, and it seems more difficult for men than for women in some cases, to really shape the self in a functional way outside of these institutional patterns, right? We need these institutional patterns, but, and like we talked about at the beginning of the course, we've fallen deep into a well of individualism where the kind of dominant narrative has been, we don't need institutions, right? We are, as human beings, we can individually form each of our identities, essentially sort of cut off from everything else. And at least, for working class men, this doesn't seem to be working really well. Okay, followed up, Reeves cites Jennifer Silva's ethnography of a town in Pennsylvania. I think she calls it Coal Creek. It would have been a working class kind of coal mining town, in rural Pennsylvania. And what does she say? There's some men there, few, that have worked really hard and been able to sustain their traditional roles, right? So they've managed to maintain this sort of like provider, head of the family, kind of, caring for my kids, all of those things. They've managed to kind of hold on to that. But, I'm going to highlight one word, and only one. I'm going to do it in a really alarming color. Most, right, have had to look for alternate places, alternate sources of meaning, and this is all over the place, right? Some have turned to religion, right, which is probably pretty pro-social. You're not going to get a ton of trouble out of those. Self-improvement, same thing, right? Probably a pretty pro-social way. But then certainly some less social ways, right? Things like white nationalism, right? And of course, when your life's not going great, the tendency of human beings is to look for scapegoats. And, anyone who's, for people living in predominantly white rural Pennsylvania, I'm sure anyone of another ethnicity, or the globalists, or the World Economic Forum, or any of these things, finds itself to be a rather attractive scapegoat for their problems, right? So white nationalism, and then just drugs, right? The opioid epidemic, right? But other drugs as well, have worked their way in, fentanyl, meth, and all of those things. Okay, I'll go back one slide. Yeah, I know. I fixed it when I was looking at it just before class. I copied some of the quotes from a PDF of the book, and some of the spacing got a little bit messed up. Okay. So I fix it. Boop. Okay. So lonely men. So we've talked about a sex recession already. Survey for American Life reported in 2021 a friend recession as well, citing specifically 15% of men, right, saying that they have no close friends, right? Zero, nada, nilch. So again, you can imagine how, like we saw earlier in the course, right? How having 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 plus caring adults for young people had a positive impact, and 0 trusted adults, had a quite negative impact on all these stress-related factors. Well, we don't have kind of specific numbers on this. We can imagine that having 0 close friends, like literally no one to turn to, would have a somewhat similar kind of role. 1990, right? So if we go back to that lovely era, 45% of young men said when they were facing problems, they would reach out to their friends. That number has like halved, right? To 22%. And a third of men now say that their first call is to their parents, right? Now, this may be related, to Gen Z growing up slower as well. Like when we're thinking Gen Z, we talked at the beginning of the class, they're moving out slower, right? They're closer to their parents. They're reaching those adult markers a lot later. But, I don't think it's just that. So better than a third, their parents are they're probably their first and most important social resource, which is not great, right? Okay. And in Japan, we talked about this already, so I won't cover it again. We talked about it when we talked about Haidt's book, right? Reeve also cites the hikikomori as a worrying trend. And again, we're seeing a lot of this same kind of phenomenon sort of creeping into the US. Maybe you call them neckbeards. I don't know what you call them. We don't have maybe a specific and as good of a name as hikikomori. Maybe we call them American or Canadian hikikomori. Some have been living in their room for years, and it's not just young men anymore. This is now a phenomenon that's swallowing up some percentage of men in general, right? And once they're in there, once you embrace social isolation, it's really, really hard to leave and get out. Okay, so yeah, we're seeing this all over the place. And again, it's a principally male phenomenon. You do see some women in the same place, but not in nearly as many numbers, and not in such a way as they have, a cool name like hikikomori. Okay, last couple things here. So boys seem to be a little bit less resilient than girls in childhood as well, right? So, Reeve talks about this in terms of like children as being either orchids or dandelions, right? Orchids are incredibly easy to kill. If you've ever bought an orchid as a gift for someone, that thing dies if you forget to water it for like 8 minutes. But you can't kill a dandelion if you try, right? Boys seem to be more naturally inclined in that kind of orchid direction, at least in kind of, late modernity where we sit right now. Okay. It's the end of the semester, friends. All right. So, a couple of things. All right. So, are boys in that last fifth of the income distribution, right? So, the poorest fifth of the income distribution are less likely to escape poverty than their female counterparts. In Canada, boys born into the poorest households are twice as likely as girls to remain poor their entire lives. In the US, boys raised in poverty are less likely than girls to be in paid work, right? So poverty seems to hit boys really hard as children as compared to their sisters, right? And the studies that have been done have looked at children from the same household, right? You have a male child and a female child. The female child is more likely to escape poverty than her brother or her cousin, right? So these are not like apples to oranges kinds of comparisons. These are people living within the same households. Neighborhoods, right? If your neighborhood is poor, You're less likely as a boy to escape that, and more likely to do things like get involved in organized crime, right, in gang life and violence. And here, this one, boys born in communities with high levels of crime and fatherlessness have worse outcomes than others. And it's really interesting, right? Because you can kind of track this statistically as the percentage of fathers, still married parents increases. It has a sort of, a high tide or a rising tide lifts all boats kind of effect, right? Even the boys whose fathers are absent, if they live in a community that has more fathers present, they do better as well, right? So whether their dad is there or not, but as the number of fathers decreases, even if your father is around, you're going to tend to do worse, right? So the kind of, aggregate father score, that's not a real thing, but the aggregate number of fathers kind of present in a community has an overall effect on boys in that community. They're more likely to, have better adult prospects, less likely to get involved in crime, less likely to engage in that risk-taking behavior, the drugs, the early sexual intercourse, right, and all of those things. So, fathers appear to be really, 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 really important. And just their presence, right, just being around. So there's been like all sorts of ridiculous, I say ridiculous, they seem silly initiatives in kind of working class neighborhoods, right? Things like Dads on Patrol, where a group of dads wearing like Dad on Patrol will like they'll walk around in the high schools, right? Just being like, hey, we're dads, we're here, we're present in this community, just to try and make themselves more visible, right? They often have no official role. They just like talk to the school and they're like, hey, can we come and walk around in our dad t-shirts and tell dad jokes? And that's what they do, right? And we've seen, some positive effects of that, right? Just them being present and super visible actually does improve, outcomes a little bit. Will lower some of the violent crime, but it's hard to maintain those initiatives, which is the biggest problem. Okay. Yeah, boys raised by single moms, or single parents, but single moms in particular, have worse outcomes than girls do, right? And all sorts of things, right? Including their own sisters, lower rates of college enrollment. They have more behavioral problems, more likely to get involved in antisocial behavior, all of these sorts of things, right? So it's some of it is down to supervision, but some also seems to be down to having boys struggling with creating a sort of, functional masculine identity. What does masculinity look like? Absent fathers, you turn to other sources like popular culture, probably popular culture in large part, and other father-like figures in the community, which are often kind of slightly older but antisocial peers, right? Members of gangs in particular are there. Okay. Boys seem to benefit much more from girls, from successful placement into foster families, right? Girls still do better if they're placed in a foster family, but the jump for boys in terms of life outcomes is considerably better. And yeah, especially at that bottom of the socioeconomic ladder, it's boys and men who are falling behind girls and women. So again, I think you could rightly see this in a lot of ways as a kind of social justice issue, right? The people being left behind more are boys. And if you want to talk, in the US in terms of racial categories, the lag is much worse for black boys, right? Black boys and men suffer considerably more from that. They're already facing a sort of uphill battle in terms of life outcomes and all sorts, college attendance and all sorts of things. And, kind of broken homes, fatherlessness, being poor puts an even greater pressure on them and perpetuates those negative cycles that these communities are already trapped in. Okay. So now we get to the really, really confusing stuff. Because, if you're asking, a question like, okay, well, what could we do about this? One of the really big problems, and I have like 3 slides here that are all basically programs that have failed. right? And again, they're not really targeted towards men. They're kind of broadly targeted, but they are programs that just don't do anything, right? And so when it's like, okay, well, what can we do to help men and boys? We don't really know, right? We're having trouble figuring that out. Now, I think a lot of it is there hasn't been a lot of focus on this question. I think it's coming into focus, but it's not, people have been more focused on other social priorities, rightly so, I think, but they haven't focused a lot on boys and men. All right, so let's talk some examples, and we'll just point out how something's amiss and we don't quite know what, which is why nothing we're doing seems to really be working. All right, so in Kalamazoo, Michigan, right? Kalamazoo, fun to write, fun to say. I don't know if it's fun to be from Kalamazoo, probably not. But, whatever. If you're from Kalamazoo, there you go. Interesting case study because at some point, a rich benefactor who's anonymous, right, basically put a big kind of trust together. And basically what this trust does is anyone who goes through the city's K-12 school system, right, gets their tuition paid at almost any college in the state. There are some exceptions, right? Some of the private colleges don't get covered, but any public college in Michigan is covered by this Kalamazoo grant, right? Okay, so since the beginning of this program, it has done wonders for the women of Kalamazoo, right? So it has increased the completion rate, female college completion rate amongst the women of Kalamazoo getting a bachelor's degree by 45%. There has been no measurable impact on men at all, right? And what Reeve notes is men, and this is true everywhere, but Kalamazoo as well, seem to zigzag their way through higher ed rather than move smoothly through it. And women are more likely to move smoothly through the process, right? So women are much more likely to finish in 4 years than men are. Women are much more likely to, finish the program that they began in. Men are much more likely to change programs several times, to drop out, come back, switch colleges, right? Go from this college to that college, struggle, leave, come back, never finish, try something else. It's a much less kind of straightforward path. Okay, other programs. The Stay the Course program at Tarrant County College in Fort Worth, Texas, right? So other end of the country, totally different socioeconomic kind of circumstances. Basically, like community colleges are a weird kind of feature of American life, in American educational life. They generally offer like 2-year certificates or diplomas or a sort of transfer program to a 4-year college, right? We used to have these kinds of institutions in Edmonton, right? MacEwan University used to be Grant MacEwan Community College. It did mostly the same thing. So did Concordia, now Concordia University of Edmonton. Used to be Concordia University College. Same thing with King's, used to be a university college. And mostly, aim to sort of help people who might not have been your first rung entrance into university or wanted smaller class sizes or whatever, help them transition. This is a big part of American life. It would offer like 2-year programs. So you could get a certificate in, I don't know, in a law office. It's escaping me. The person who does actually all the work, paralegal, right? Lawyers do nothing. Paralegals do everything. No, lawyers do a lot, but paralegals do even more. Right, a lot of these programs will run through community colleges, and you still have that in the US in large part, but they have a dreadful completion rate, right? Only about half of enrolled students actually complete community college 2-year or transfer programs to a larger, to a 4-year program. Okay, so they tried this Stay the Course program at Tarrant County College, and what did it do? Well, it tripled associate degree completions amongst women and had no impact on men. So this is just a list, right? We could just kind of tick these off. preschool program at Absidarian Perry. Oh, sorry. An evaluation of 3 Absidarian Perry and early training project showed substantial long-term benefits for girls, no benefits for boys. Project Reads in North Carolina, summer reading program, boosted literacy scores significantly for third grade girls, giving them the equivalent of 6 weeks accelerated learning. And there was a negative. Somehow the boys attended the 6-week reading program and got worse at reading, or insignificant reading score effect for boys. I don't know how that works. That's really depressing. It's like, well, little Timmy, we've put you through our intense 6-week reading program. Let's check your baseline compared to when you started, and you've gotten worse at reading. Super. We feel good about ourselves, right? Students who attended their first choice high school in Charlotte, North Carolina, after taking part in a choice lottery, had higher GPAs, took more AP classes, and were more likely to enroll in college. But these overall gains were driven entirely by girls, not so much by the boys. Mentoring program for high school seniors in New Hampshire doubled the number of girls enrolling in four-year college, but had no average effect on boys. Urban boarding schools in Baltimore and Washington, D.C. boosted academic, and this is, largely, especially Baltimore, is very working class, very black, and very poor. Boosted academic performance amongst low-income black students, but only the girls. Taken literally, the point estimates imply that our findings are driven entirely by female applicants. Super, right? College scholarship, there's just like a list of these. This goes on for pages in the book. It's hilarious. College scholarship programs in Georgia increased the number of women getting degrees, but had a mutive effect on white men and mixed, noisy results for black and Hispanic men, which is statistics' way of saying the data is so messed up that we cannot make sense of it. And it's just like, we see some high, we see some low, but there's no rhyme or reason to the data. Project STAR provided extra learning support and financial assistance for college freshmen, right? First-year college students, gave a big boost to women's academic performance, higher GPA, more credits, and lower rate of academic probation, but had no effect on men, right? I have more. Paycheck Plus pilot program provides 3,000 childless participants with a wage bonus of $2,000. Their main goal is to lift the employment rate. They evaluated the program, found a large effect, oops, there's an extra space there too, on employment rates amongst women, but no detectable effect on men. Milwaukee, right? So this is all over the United States. This is not like one place. This is just from all over, right? And what do you see? Statistically significant impact on the rates of earnings for women at the 2-year mark, but not for men. Greater benefits for participation for women. And what's the last one? Significant positive impacts, but not for the male ones, right? Boom, right? And we could go on. There's more of this. I just, got tired. I bet the kids are embarrassed of the dad patrol, probably. I taught at King's for 1 semester. It was not a great experience for me. I did not really vibe with what they had going on, but I was put in, I had a sociology class, their intro soc, and they put me in a lecture theater. I'm like, oh, where is this lecture theater? They're like, oh, the lecture theater. I'm like, I'm sorry, the lecture theater? They have one. It's also the theater, right? So the stage and all the stuff. So they had a play. So at one point I was standing in front of a room with stage props and super fun stuff. King's has its shtick. Apparently the ed program is really wonderful. Okay, so, and this is going, this is the last slide of the course, and I'm sorry not to have a more hopeful message. Now a message of hope. Everything is garbage. Okay, so there's what Reeves theorizes, and here, when he talks to statisticians, right, what they will tell him, and I think this is correct from looking at a bunch of this research, is no one can explain this phenomenon, right? It's not explained by socioeconomics. It's not explained by parental income, parental religiosity, parental employment, family, not entirely by family structure. It's just sort of like there. Boys aren't benefiting from social programs in the same way that girls do, right? And boys are struggling, and we can't seem to figure out why. Okay, so what Reeves suggests is it seems to be some mix of these things, right? Resilience. Girls seem more resilient. Motivation. Boys seem less motivated than they've ever been. And, that loss of their kind of set social role, what they would aspire to, really, really seems to be hurting them, right? And that lack of motivation seems to play into aspiration. And it could be a lot of things, right? Like people have theorized that it's video games, it's porn. We've talked about all of those things, right? It's cheap sex. And I think those things all probably play in to a kind of big malaise and that loss of kind of the family role. Maybe entertainment, the way we've done entertainment just dulls boys' motivation more than it does girls. We don't really know. It's something that remains, I think, a big question, right? Now, just funny things. Female students, he notes, are more than twice as likely to study abroad than their male peers. And if one of your friends, if you're a woman, goes on a study abroad program, it doubles your chances of studying abroad. Male peer interaction seems to go in the opposite direction, right? Men seem to be motivating each other to stay put, right? Rather than take adventures, travel the world. Speaking to I think a larger decline in agency, aspiration, and motivation, it just seems like there's something missing for this generation of boys. And how do we help? Well, we don't really understand the problem yet. So no one really knows. What we know is nothing we've tried yet really seems to be working. Reeve has his theories, right? And the back half of the book is all things like he thinks we need to, really motivate and kind of destigmatize men going into the heal professions, right? Health, education, administration, and literacy, right? Moving into those jobs of the future and away from those jobs of the past, which I think is a tough lift for a lot of men. But we definitely see some progress there. We've had programs like Wisest, which encouraged women to go into engineering. One of the things that he suggests is we need programs that would, similar programs that would encourage men to go into nursing, right? I don't know what it would be called. I'm bad at acronyms. So, but that's the kind of thing. Changing kind of roles of fatherhood and expectations and social norms, and essentially kind of remaking boys and their aspirations around what the world actually looks like rather than a world that's largely gone and isn't coming back. I think we're already seeing some kind of shifts, right? Some for good, some for bad. There's a lot of kind of, I guess, anecdotal media stories, especially about men becoming more religious and young men in particular, moving into, more traditional religions, like really traditional Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy, which again is probably more pro-social than, following down the Andrew Tate, Nick Fuentes sort of paths. Increasingly people moving that way, largely driven by social media. I know not everybody loves Jordan Peterson, and I have mixed feelings about the man myself. But a few years ago, his influence seemed to be pushing, young men in a kind of relatively positive direction, the more clean your room rather than burn it down kind of direction. So we're starting to see, I think, kind of individual figures appealing to these people, but there's obviously a lot of risk. And if how to put this. Revolutions are largely driven by young men, right? The Russian Revolution, the French Revolution are often driven by disaffected young men. And so, for the sake of social stability, we probably want to get this one figured out at some point. And with that super depressing note, everything is garbage. Find something you love and it's taken from you. your coworker, your job, your mango yogurt. Sorry, I'm doing a Brooklyn Nine-Nine bit. Never love anything, right? But on that very depressing note, and I'm sorry to end the course on a very depressing note, and by once again screwing up my PowerPoint, that is it. That is the content for the course. All right, so what we can do here is we can sort of switch into, is this a global trend or just for the US? I mean, we're seeing it globally, right? We see it certainly in Canada. We're seeing it across Europe as well. I mean, other parts of the world, like certainly in more kind of modernized countries and developed economies, we definitely see that. Okay, is a global trend? Okay, is the final cumulative? It is not cumulative, right? Okay, let me go to maybe I'll create a blank slide here. I will create one blank slide so I can write stuff. Okay, back we go. All right, so is it cumulative? No, it is not cumulative. Right, so we talked, so for the final, we got religion, right? So that's unit number 1. We've got mental health, number 2, youth and technology, right? And that's the Jonathan Haidt stuff, number 3. And then boy crisis is number 4, and that is the total. All right, so out of the 5, what are we going to do? I hadn't decided on the breakdown. I will decide in this moment what we will do. 1, 2, 1. Okay, so that's going to be your question breakdown. 1 on religion, 1 on mental health, 1 on youth and 2 on youth and technology, and 1 on the boy crisis, right? And again, kind of a random shuffle of things to go there. Okay. Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind. All right, I'm going to clear. Are these trends of under... Oh, are these trends... Oh, hang on, I meant to clear you. Are these trends of underachieving boys comparing to when women weren't allowed in the workforce? I mean, some are, right? Some are these trends as women have moved through from the 1970s to the present, but some of them are much more recent, right? And we see this kind of decline in male achievement in university and college and all of these other spheres happening, as women rise, but I don't think the cause is women entering the workforce more. There seems to be something else kind of sapping the energy out of young men, right? So it's not necessarily even a comparative thing. And I think what's interesting is there does seem to be some major differences, right? Why would a program that's kind of gender neutral, that can be accessed by either men or women, help women a lot and help men none at all? That's a kind of weird question. How much time? All you want to know is time. Will the TA be marking your finals? Yes, Michaela will be marking some of the questions. I am marking the majority of them, but she takes a little bit off my plate so I can get these to you before New Year's or St. Swithin's Day, which is in July. The Feast of St. Swithin, it's a real thing. Look it up. Yeah, she's going to take a couple, probably 1 from each unit off my plate. And yeah, I will try to get them out. I generally try to get the marks returned, leave a couple of days gap. So, if something to you looks hinky, right, like you need to question it or you want to review really quickly, we have some time to do that, right? And again, I mean, if something looks really wonky to you and after the new year you want to come back and chat with me, I'm always here. And, whatever, if we have to change grades, yeah, we do that. It's been done before. But don't. It's so tiring. But also you can. But also don't. But also you can. Oh, how much time do you have to write the final? You're going to get 2 hours, okay? You wanted 2 hours, you're getting 2 hours. It's 5 questions, right? It's the same amount of questions, you get more time. I don't want to hear any of this. I was rushed at the end because you have an extra half hour, okay? There. We're good. I'm just kidding. I only mock because I love. But yeah, I'll give you 2 hours for the final. And again, it's on Friday, open midnight to midnight. From when you start, you get 2 hours and all of that fun stuff. I still have to write the boy crisis questions and all of that jazz. Okay. The class was fun. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed teaching it, and I always do, which is apparently why I get to teach this class 3 times a year. So I will wait if there's any other questions. If there are none, then we could all go. It's not extra time. I was planning on giving you 2 hours the whole time, and now I just made myself seem overly generous by being like, yeah, I'll give you 2 hours. No, I was going to give you 2 hours the whole time for the final exam. So there you go. Okay, it's the end. I guess we won't see you on Friday because it's an online exam, but we'll see you around. Oh, wait. I know you've talked about this a lot already, but could you mention any classes you're teaching in winter and spring? All right, well, you pack up. In winter, I am teaching Intro to Methods, Sociology of Religion, this class again, so this will do you no good, and a little class not in sociology, CHRTC 241, Catholicism and Pop Culture. In the spring, I've got this class again, SOC 100, and CHRTC 203, which is the sociology of Christianity, and in the summer, an online version of Catholicism and Pop Culture. And then I think it all just repeats over and over again until the end of time. All right. Namaste. Hello. See, can I be like my 6-year-old and be like,
When you tap on it, it does adjust. Well, it was adjusted.
I have to take those out. It's
Okay.
set up properly and I will fix it. I just have not had time.
Zoo things.
Yes.
I have to look up the stats on the. You're saying that there's no effect on men. I mean, I see worse effect. I mean, not as great, but I do see like some improvements from. So they say in completion rate that the primary impact of the Kalamazoo is encouraging most students to blah increases in completion rates, and I don't know when I look at the actual Kalamazoo website on the impact of this Kalamazoo promise. It's not as great as for females, but they do show a change for men.
A bit of a change. Okay.
Like,
I have to revise that because
for all, when it comes,
What's
you can
that?
compare all
Oh,
women,
wow. Look at the black
women,
man.
black women, black men,
That's a substantially lower.
yeah, Hispanic. But you know, like, so they're saying that we give them more money, they can do part-time school and they complete in 10 years, which is a long time.
Oh, 10 years. Yeah.
6 years or 10 years in completion rates. But anyway, I was just
Yeah.
commenting.
Okay. I just took Reeves' word for it because I looked at his book and I'm like, okay, I'm assuming he knows what he's talking about. So.
Surprised that there'd be no difference. Like,
Yeah, but 10 years is wild. Like for a college completion of 10 years. Yeah, that's a wild amount. But yeah, okay, thanks for that. Yes. I will attempt to give enough time. It's really going to depend how efficient I am at grading it, right? So I will do my best before I post the grades to give you some gap. It depends. You're very welcome. I am not unwell.
yeah.
I'm really tired today. It's like the semester has exhausted.
I didn't think that was like physically, but like my eyes aren't opening all the way. Anyways, I'm sure you've heard this already. I wasn't gonna ask for too big of an extension, but I'd like for tonight to work on my paper if that's okay. So like 9 in the morning ish. Okay, thank you. And I wanted to touch on like one specific point. I was gonna talk about my paper. I have it written down, but after thinking about it, I don't think it's that. Like maybe you can clarify a little bit. So with Laura Mulvey's narcissistic identification, I was going to talk about how like Hyper Raquel in her like OnlyFans, she uses FanView, which is like OnlyFans, but they use AI. So basically, like subscribers can like talk to an AI version of Hyper and like have video calls and like
People want this.
it's insane. And they're like all the like grown men. She's freshly 18. So I was like going to talk
That part doesn't surprise me. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, men like young girls. It's the way it is.
yucky, but I was going to like connect narcissistic identification to that.
Okay.
But I'm not sure if that would like make sense in like the lower multi context because she is talking about film and like cameras and how like it looks on screen.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that like would make sense like on AI, like how it works with FanView is that you can have like audio messages that are AI generated and like also like texts that are like personalized to the person. I'm not sure if that would like if that's like a comparison that I can make strongly.
I think, I mean, it makes sense. It's all combined with these visual representations as well, right?
Mhm.
I mean, I think if anything, you can make a case that this is like taking it to the next level, right? It's like, okay, we have the male gaze, but it's like these technologies allow us to take that kind of, scope of the like
Right.
fetishistic kind of
Mhm.
control of a woman's body to an even greater extent, right? Now we can interact with a simulacrum of that, right?
Right.
Like a fake
Yeah.
version of her. I feel gross talking about this.
I do too. In this entire paper, like I'm so mad that I picked this freaking topic because I've been looking at Piper Raquel's like TikTok for the last 24 hours and I want to bleach my eyes out. And you're not gonna have a fun time reading the paper because it's just disgusting. It's so gross. But
Man, the boundaries of the world keep getting weirder and weirder.
yeah, I should have wrote Hindu nationalism again. I was like, I should just stick to what I know.
That was
I
a fun
think
paper. I like that. I was like, yay, childhood indoctrination. Huzzah.
sometimes I feel like a one-trick pony because I always talk about Hindu nationalism, but it's a fixation. It's not a